It's time to rebel. And that's what I would tell people. Stop sitting around making excuses and rebel. People buy from people that they trust. And if we can give them willingly to people, we're blessing their life. Leadership 100% is not going to be the catalyst for change. We're looking to give those people a voice. Best relationships typically start in a negative place, and being creative, sometimes you're going to piss some people off. But there is a way to respectfully decline what's wrong versus doing what's right. Because how many people get that response? My mission is to honor the man that showed me the way, which is my dad, Curtis Dupree.
Very often in sales, marketing, engineering, or any other role in business, do you feel that you're just following the process, that you're not creative enough, that you're stuck? Well, Dale Dupree and I are going to change that. I'm inspired by how open and honest Dale is about things that are so important to our personal lives as well as our careers, but very often are just overlooked. And he already inspired thousands of people with his rebellion movement. He inspired me, and I'm sure he will inspire you after you tune into this episode now. Well, I'm not going to take more of your time. Thank you and enjoy our conversation.
I wanted to understand, what does rebellion mean to you? So what does sales rebellion mean to you? And just if you can share some thoughts on the meaning of the concept, or on the movement, or on the philosophy behind it.
Yeah, happy to. I appreciate the question too. So rebellion for me is based on this identity of hope, and hope is a verb as well too, because I think a lot of times people hear the word hope and they think, oh great, we're hoping that something will change, but I see hope as a very powerful word that leads to a very powerful action, and ultimately the rebellion is founded on that perspective of sales can be better. And really, there's always been this battle in sales, two sides to the battle, but leading up until our generation, now I believe there's three sides. And the two sides are, there's the side that is pushy, that's manipulative, that wants your money, wants to cash it, the check at the bank and then move on through transaction to transaction to transaction. Doesn't really care about the person on the other side, is really just ultimately looking to better their own situation, which, look, there's nothing wrong with that, but ultimately, because of the things that are attached to it, the stereotypes, the negatives, it creates bad outcomes for other people. And there's nothing good about that, period. Even if you're making a lot of money, it's nothing good about that. So then there's the other side, the people that want to be honest, want to put the prospect first, want to be servant leaders. But at the same time, the problem with those folks is that mindset and perspective is not nurtured necessarily from leadership. So you have this gap where you have people that feel very specifically about doing good in sales, but the gap exists in who is it that's leading them. And in most cases, the leaders are pressured by a CEO or a board of directors to get money, to hit numbers, and that achievement of metrics causes that other side of the fence to be, maybe just a little too quiet about what it is that they're trying to do. But I believe that we also have this third group of people who are just kind of very neutral and just really just trying to get through sales and do what they need to do to kind of achieve what they need to achieve. They don't really take the bad side or the good side necessarily. They just kind of walk indifferent to the subject. And to me, we're looking for all three of those people. Ultimately, we want to try to stray away from this identity of creating indifference around the people's opinion that are inside sales, right? So I hear a lot from people in my DMs that go, man, I'd comment on your post, but my boss might see and then they might fire me. And then to me, that's the middle ground, right? Those are the people that are just just going to squeeze through here. And the problem is that most of those people think they don't have options, that there are no other rebel leaders out there that will hire them and that will help them with their career, but there are. And so it's our goal not only to change the stereotype of the bad and to help the people in the middle to see the good and to stand out for it, but ultimately it's also our goal to raise rebel leadership inside of sales organizations and to help people to see that putting people first before products, putting community before commission checks, giving your reps the ability to be creative and to give experiences instead of just pitching people all day will elevate your existence, your reputation, and ultimately change the entire landscape of sales. And that's what this rebellion is all about.
Rebellion is the word is obviously have a more stronger connotation than a change, right? And very often, I think companies, they asked or they were looking for leadership to drive the change, right? But kind of have the feeling that what what you offer and then something that you stand for is that typically the leadership is not enough to drive the change anymore, and you need a rebel to actually show there is a different way, the different path, and just change the game. Is that the case?
A good way to look at it. And the thing about it that I've found in my career is that there's always this 1 or 2 or 3 reps inside of an organization out of, like, let's say 50 people that are the top of the team. And there's always a different story between all 3 of them into how they got there. But no matter what, there's one of them that people would describe as like weird or very audacious or different. This is from my own experience, and not just in sales and as a VP of sales at big organizations, but also as a rep and as somebody that networks with the community, and then also as the leader of the Sales Rebellion. When I started this company 4 years ago, it's crazy how many times I've found this story that there's always this one person that thinks outside the box, does things a little bit differently. And even if some years they end up as like rep number 2 or rep number 3, consistently they're the top rep when you look at a 10, 15, 20-year span, whether it's with the company that they're at or with multiple companies as well too. So this idea really is about reputation building inside of this rebellion, that we're looking for people that care about their reputation, that understand that they're not the 1% as they would seem to be in their stack rankings. Because when you take 1,000 companies and you find that there's one rep at each one, you have 1,000 people all of a sudden. And the thought process of that is that is extremely helpful in showing people that there's a better way, that it's not just this one rep doing it at your organization. There's thousands, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of reps out there. So we're looking to give those people a voice. And, when people say things like, yeah, my boss doesn't want me to send direct mail. Yeah, my boss doesn't want me to send that email that, format that you had suggested on your LinkedIn profile or, in some of your content. And I usually just say to that person, hey, what did your boss tell you to jump off a bridge? And did you jump? Is that also a thing? And look, you want to respect your leadership, but there is a way to respectfully decline what's wrong versus doing what's right. And so in my mind, when somebody tells me how to do something, it's like, well, let me fail myself based on me humanizing this process, me doing what I think is correct. And in most cases in sales, look, what people are asked to do inside of their individual roles from their leadership is wrong. And I'll tell you why it's wrong, because it's not honest. It's not raw. It's not blunt. It's not to the point. It's always beating around the bush. It's like, oh, don't say that because you might lose the deal. Well, wouldn't that be what we would want? If there's an opportunity to lose the sale because we're not the right fit or we don't have some of the things that this person wants, wouldn't we want to walk away from that? And so the issue here is like you said, that leadership 100% is not going to be the catalyst for change. The issue here really is that we have to find those people that are out there that are like myself when I was, known as the copier warrior, and others out there like me that are willing to stand up for and lead that charge for change for the betterment of our communities.
In one of your content pieces, or I think one of the videos, you mentioned this concept of, old school methodology of making your money and retire doesn't work anymore. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what is the new school right now.
So let me caveat that in that I'm pretty sure it says it in this post, but that it definitely works. Right. It works to just continue to beat the phone and send 1,000 emails, and that stuff works. Right. If it didn't work, people wouldn't do it. But here's the problem is it's not working as well. And so this identity of, I think it's outdated and I don't agree with it. This idea of, hey, I'm just trying to get to 60 or 55 or 58 or whatever so I can cash out and retire and live in my solitude. Well, people are meant for community. People are meant for relationships. Even the most introverted person usually and typically has a spouse. They usually and typically have children. They usually and typically have brothers, sisters, and even if they don't, they identify people as a brother or a sister in their life as well too. So we as humans are made for relationships. And so this idea that somehow making all this money is going to make you happy is a really outdated thought and theory in general. And I think that this is something that's actually been showing up, evidence of this has been showing up for years in regards to people's happiness and true success. But we're afraid to point it out because I think the other side of it is that we all are a slave to money at the end of the day. And sure, whether or not you want to blame a capitalist society, a very a very weird world that we live in, where like from country to country, people do it different. But that at the forefront of all of it, that it's about power and wealth, no matter where you are. It's not about community anymore. It's not about people anymore. It's not about faith anymore. It's not about the things that matter anymore. We basically tell people like, hey, you were born in this world to work from 18 years old until 65 and then retire, and then you can do whatever you want. But you owe us all this time to go to bat for our companies and to work for us and to make us money. That's really the outdated theory and perspective that I see. And I see it that in the year 2023, it's very easy for people to work for themselves or to work remotely, even for organizations that are desiring people that have a bigger picture perspective, right? Like my dad, one of my dad's mentors, this is a great way to look at his whole perspective. One of my dad's mentors, he's in his mid 80s. And I actually got to sit with him recently, just about a year, 2 years ago. And I sat with him because I've made a lot of life changes. Lots of things have changed with me in the last year and a half, 2 years. And so I asked him if he would just sit and reminisce with me and my dad about my dad and stories of when they first met and hear things maybe I've never heard before. And this guy opened my mind to so much. And really, he opened my mind to this thought. And that I've always had this thought, but I've not necessarily been vocal about it. But, you know, that at 80, in his mid 80s, he told me, he said, man, I'm still trying to love my wife better. I'm still trying to be able to help those in my community and around me that seek more for their life in a way that I can possibly give back. And look, that's not charity either, right? Like a lot of people hear that, they're like, oh, that's like some kind of charity, mindset. It's like, no, it's not. That is a real human being that has tapped into the identity of what he understands happiness to be and what he knows life is, which is that it's a never ending journey until we're gone, that every moment is precious. Life should be lived, right? This idea that we work to live is crazy to me. And so we have to stop saying things like, I can't wait to retire. I'm saving up all this money to stop working. Like, stop working at 45, right? Stop working at 22, right? Stop working now. Start loving what you're doing. Start breathing life back into your existence and career, and it'll be a much more enjoyable existence for yourself.
So just to iterate, the new school is connecting your personality, your personal life, and then walking through that personal life together with your professional part of sort of like existence, and not just necessarily enjoying the work, but making the work more meaningful and having a certain plan, a certain story that evolves into actually working, but also what's happening during that journey and after that journey. It's not just about the money, etc. Right?
It's a really good way to look at it as a summary, and ultimately it's about happiness. I think that's the word that we have to think about. Like, it's kind of a buzzword today, I would say, with a lot of the big influencers out there. They talk about like, you should be happy, but I mean it. I'm talking about happiness in all the facets of your life. Like, where are the addictions that you need to get rid of, whether big or small, right? The things that are affecting your relationships. Where are the risks that you're not taking, that you continue to put off, big or small? Find those things. Make your life happier by doing the hard stuff. And ultimately by looking at life differently than that you're being manipulated to understand it by the status quo and the way the world thinks. Your boss loves it when you think in your head, at 55, I'm going to retire. They love that. And why feed that beast? Why feed that mediocrity in the first place? Like, take a stand for yourself and love your life better, become happier, enjoy what it is that we've been given as fruit on a daily basis instead of suffering from it.
Right. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be effective, you shouldn't be efficient, you shouldn't be productive, and you shouldn't generate and create, right? It's not the excuse to just, spending, the whole time in the Zen, because, I think society and just generally, like economy, we need to create value, right? We need still to move forward and just kind of, create value, right? Because I think that people sometimes they misconcept that, having a balance or enjoying the life or creating things for yourself and, just being excited about it doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot be productive in the same way and you cannot generate the revenue and grow, right? It's just kind of doing both, because we're spending so much time inefficiently doing things that doesn't bring the value to us and basically just procrastinating, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that hard work ethic is like a lost art. quite frankly. And that, again, that people see, this is the problem, right? Is that people hear this message and they think, oh, I should stop working as much. When really the message is it's like, you should work just as hard, if not harder, but you should love that work. So the problem is that we burn people out for so long, and that this word, hard work, this phrase is kind of demonized to an extent by an entire generation, right? Like my dad taught me work ethic, and I think it's really about work ethic more than it is hard work. I think that that's something we need to bring back, is that, look, if I want quality of life, I have to understand that money is still important. And I listen, like the guy on this podcast isn't broke, like, and I've made way too much money for a guy like myself. But I'm also like, I have, because of those things, not fixed anything in my life. And as a matter of fact, when I was making some of the most money of my entire existence and at the pinnacle of my success, I attempted suicide because of how unhappy I was and the direction in which my life was going, that I then was very silent about for 5 years of my life, like up until basically a few years after my father passed away. And I realized this is something important to talk about, because I shouldn't be ashamed of it. And ultimately I should understand like that I got there in silence, and we're too quiet about stuff. So if we think to ourselves, right, that, man, I just don't want to work, like tell people about that and help them to understand where you're coming from. Because most of the time that isn't necessarily burnout like people would tell you that it is. What it is that it's this problem, like I just said a couple of times, that we are so disconnected with what it is that we want and desire, that we were taking one side or the other. We're either taking the side of the people that say, oh, just chill and like do nothing and like, you know, make an online course and sell it and just chill on the beach. And then there's this other side of people that are like, no, you're insane. Like, come to the office, go to work. This is the way life is. Like there really ultimately is no other path. But both of those paths suck, in my opinion. The path of fulfillment and happiness is the one that understands work ethic and good work ethic, and ultimately understands what you desire out of life. And if you want to make a course and sell it from the beach, that's fine. But like, is that course changing people's lives? Because if not, it's a short game. Yeah. Like you'll do it for a couple of years and people will be on to what it is that you're selling and not see the value in it because there's no long-term outlook. And again, that's what this whole concept to me is that even if I look at 55 as my retirement age, that's too soon. If my dad's mentor in his mid 80s had just said like, I'm not going to do anything anymore or work anymore, then he wouldn't be impacting people's lives right now the way that he is. I mean, he's changing people on a daily basis, which makes our society and communities better and stronger.
I'm looking at one of the quotes from one of your posts on LinkedIn where you say, there is power when you show a weakness, right? And I think that the new school is being able to show the weakness, talk about that weakness, and then just work it out, and for the better, for the personal better, for the business better, right? It's just, it's not anymore about the process, about the team, about the funnel, about sort of like the KPI. It's more kind of interconnected into personality, right? Into who you are and how you kind of go about it to create the longevity, right? Because, I think that to be truly creating value for yourself and building your brand and creating a lifestyle for yourself, it takes years and it takes the discipline, right? And you cannot be always strong. You cannot be always on top of your A game, but kind of being able to show the weakness. So I kind of agree with that saying that of yours about being able to show the weakness. And I'm so kind of fascinated about, and I'm very, like appreciative for you doing that on your LinkedIn, on your posts, telling about your story, being an example and sort of like showing what was the result of that example, how impacted that your life and how you now are a better person of yourself after the fact, right?
Yeah, the weakness side of it, like it's that we all have it, right? We all have something that bothers us. The thing is that we would prefer the Instagram lifestyle. Like, look at me, I'm on a boat, I'm doing this, I'm on vacation. Like, there's something this is something I actually don't talk about much. But I think it's a really good point to make in this instance is that like my wife is somebody that she looks at our relationship as something that's very sacred. And she sees ultimately because of past abuses and things that I've suffered from, that it would actually, it would hurt me for her to live some type of Instagram lifestyle, right? Where she's taking selfies of her beautiful and amazing body, and her and showing people like a side of her essentially that look like most women should confidently show without a doubt. But because like my wife meets me where I am, and she thinks in a way that understands my weaknesses ultimately, like I'm the one that gets the selfies from vacation, like no one else, right? Because she also says like, what, like people are going to look at me and be like, she's hot, like that's cool. That's not what I'm trying to accomplish in my life. What I'm trying to accomplish in my life is impact for people. And ultimately, the only person that deserves a picture like that is my husband. So I send them directly to him, and that's who gets them. And like for me, like that, I know it's kind of it might even be to some people listening a strange example, in a sense. But this is where I think differently. And in my mind, the same thing goes for most things in our life. Like, are you showing people what they deserve to see? Are you impacting people in the way that you ultimately should be? Or are you kind of just going with the flow and doing what the world tells us to do in the first place? And like my wife is a rebel because of that. She's a rebel in a lot of other ways as well too. And ultimately one of the smartest people that I know. And because she's able to also say like, here are some weaknesses in my life that, maybe I want that affirmation to an extent because of the way society looks at women and like, and maybe I need that to some extent, right? But why don't I seek to get it in a way that's more altruistic? And that is something that really actually makes me a better person in the first place. And like, who better to do it than the person that she's been with for the last 20 years? And at the same time, I have to also be that same thing for her. And so like the weakness side for me is very easy because I have such great support on the back end in regards to my family, my spouse, the mentors in my life, my friends. Like it's been easier for me to talk about the darkness and the depression, the attempted suicide, the things that I've suffered through in my sales walk. And ultimately the way that I look at it is that, look, like everybody suffers from some form of issue. And for the most part, like they mask it with the picture on Instagram, with the house, with the car, with whatever it is, right? And so for me, it's like, wouldn't it be better like for people to see how human you are? And look, I've met some of these like multi-millionaires and billionaires that are big names, and I've spoken on stage with some of them as well too. What's crazy is they're not the same people that you and I see on the internet. They're very different when you get them one-on-one, and I'm not interested in that, quite frankly. And so if you're allowing yourself to be transparent and being very real as a human, I think is really what the weakness thing and that whole line that you just said is really ultimately about. Because look, the same people that you look at as like, man, look, this person has their life together, they're so lucky, how did they get like this? Like they suffer from stuff that in some cases is unspeakable and almost unbearable, which is why people are afraid to talk about it, to admit it, and to bring it to the forefront. But I have no fear.
I have this quote for you. I'm going to read it, and I apologize for the reading, but it's one of the exact quotes, right? So things that are important to our personal walk are just as important in our business life. The reason behind it, the people have a short window on this earth, and experiences are one of the most sought after pieces of the human puzzle. So being able to articulate your story and translate it throughout the powerful brand are very important pieces and keys to having a successful career, right? You said that in one of your videos, right? I love the thing. I'm like 100%, agree, relate to it. So I was just thinking about kind of segueing into, with what you just said about, being open, showing your personality, who you are, trying to be the same, and utilizing that personality as a certain map or certain keys to be able to create a career, right? A business life for yourself, right? So let's kind of sit on this for a second, just for the people to, just to also, dive into the topic of like, do I show my personality enough? Am I human enough to, and how that kind of impact, my business? So can you share your story into like, copier warrior, sales rebel, right? Because like if anyone gonna, watch you out on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on internet, they're gonna see real you. You're gonna see jokes, you're gonna see photos, you're gonna see example, you're gonna see your lifestyle, you're gonna see your family. And I'm curious, obviously, how does that impact your business career, right? Like, how does it impact your business life, and just generally, just understanding the result of this mindset and of that approach in your lifestyle and just around whatever your business goals are.
Yeah, a really good way to describe like how it's created success for me is that good or bad, I'm never indifferent to people, which is what I'm always sought to be for myself, is somebody real enough, raw enough, and open enough to failure, success, new experiences, hard stuff, easy stuff, whatever, open to anything and everything. I've always tried to put myself in that place because I just want to be a better person ultimately. And I also understand that like when we can connect with each other, even if just for the smallest amount of connection, it really changes the way that we interact with one another. And so like a great example would be, here's 2 outcomes that I've experienced in my life. Like back when I started to label myself the copy warrior, people were like, is that a persona? And I would say it's a brand, and it's Dale. And it's not the company I represent, right? It's like, it's me. And it shows you a little glimpse into who I am and what it is that I am seeking to accomplish, and also how I can help you, and what my network looks like, and what my passions are, and things that people can relate to ultimately, even though a lot of it is centered around you when you're personally branding yourself. If you understand narratives and ultimately how to speak to people through what it is that you are passionate about and you love and your experiences look like, when you understand that taking the word I out of things and just allowing it to be shared, right? Like I'm the leader of the sales rebellion, but I never go around saying that the rebellion is about me.
Right.
The rebellion is about the community that we build of people that want to change the way sales is perceived for the better and have that same fire and hope within them that I did. So here's 2 outcomes. One would be, imagine that you just submitted a bid with 19 people on it to a private company that doesn't have any rules or regulations about how they run a bid, right? They're not run by the state or the federal government. They just ran a bid and had 19 people put in. And this is the craziest part. Let's say it was for $10,000 worth of revenue. This is a real story, by the way. Like 19 people chasing $10,000 worth of revenue, like their life depended on it. Right? Well, in walks the copy warrior, and I'm just not like the rest. And I'm the 20th person that comes into this deal, right? 99% of the time, the person on the other end would say, we have 19 bids. We don't need another one, right? But what happened to me was people would pick up the phone and say, you just dropped this off? Yeah. Wow. Can you come back? Or hey, can we set up some time? Or, this was, again, like 100% of my outcome looked like this. And that I could get people's attention very well. And then that situation would go one of 2 ways. And I'm going to show you the way that it went first, but I'm going to tell you about ways that it's gone in other instances. And both to me are positive. But one of them is, the way that it went was, look, we have 19 bids. Are you sure you want to get in on this? And my response was, do you want me to get in on this? Like, it doesn't matter if I want to. The question is, do you? And most of the time people would answer yes. And the majority of the time, a high majority of the time. And so I would get the opportunity to give them those experiences, to allow them to understand my culture and the ecosystem in which I existed and how it complemented their businesses. And look, that connection was there, right? So like what I really want people to understand is it's all about the human connection. When these people start to connect with you, this is what happens. They go, hey, look, you're the 4th highest price out of these 20 people, which is pretty good, but it's, like, why wouldn't we go with these other 3? I never had to have a conversation about that, right? My response would always just be, well, here we are. I don't see you with the 5th highest price telling them the same thing. So why are you telling me this? Clearly you want to work something out because we have a connection here and you want to serve me just as much as I want to serve you. Am I right? And again, most people would even lead that conversation in some instances, Michael, with, hey, dude, we're going to go with you, but we need you to do a couple things because your price is way higher than everybody else. My favorite thing to hear was that, because I'd always just laugh and be like, that's the point, right? Like, that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day. Build enough value and connection that it looks like that. But then it would look like this sometimes too, which I think this is what all salespeople should be seeking, that they don't. Sometimes it would look like this, which is people would say, hey, Dale, man, we really enjoyed the experience, the empty donut box, the personalized wallet, because you hadn't heard from us and you thought maybe we lost ours, like it was fantastic. And here's the thing is we'd love to go with you, but we're just not going to be able to, and mostly because you're just so much more expensive than everybody else. And I loved that response too, because how many people get that response, right? And so I sought something legendary in my walk, and because of it, 99% of the time, even when I lost a deal, I had another shot at it, like a really good one. And then on top of it, like if I played that long game, so if I went through a 3-year sales cycle and came back again, I usually won it the next time around, because there was usually some form of unhappiness or just a disconnect in general from person to person in regards to who's serving them. And we don't focus on that enough in sales. Too much of the time we say, we need this like bulletproof process in order to win deals. I go, I just want people to understand ultimately what they're getting into and to connect outside of business with somebody that they think could be valuable for their life. And there was a guy one time, he told me, he said, I don't need any new friends, but I'll take your bid. And I said, no, thanks. I'm good.
Yeah.
Like have fun racing to the bottom with your lowest, offers from everybody else. I'm good. But then I never stopped calling on this guy in a way that just, was helpful to him. Like I would send him referrals. I would just send him, some cookies every once in a while and say, hey, when are we gonna get lunch? I know you don't want new friends, but at some point, bro, you're gonna meet me. I guarantee it. And look, like it took 3-4 years of doing that, which is again this choice that people have to make. But ultimately, the outcomes were fantastic, because even though he never bought from me, he gave me referrals as well too, to people in his industry and people that he was connected with. And so like, what is it that you're pursuing? Are you pursuing something in the name of business, or are you pursuing something in the name of love? Was the way that I look at it. Like, what drives you? And I don't think we use that word love enough. We as people are meant to do just that, platonically or not. Right.
Yeah.
That love is love at the end of the day, and that we have to show it to each other. And why are we so afraid of it? Like I get off the phone with random strangers and go, all right, I love you. Take care. And my wife would be like, she'll just be laughing like as I get off, like I've had that freaking out. But it's important, right? Because look, there's a lot of us even in our lives that have been traumatized by things like not hearing that word enough when we're growing up. Like we need it. And the thing is that we need that more than we need a copier. Right. Sure. A copier is extremely important in most organizations and in the majority of them. Right. And I understood that, but I also understood that the people buy from people that they trust. Whether they like me or not, it doesn't really matter. If they trust me and I have that credibility with them, then I have something that no one else has. I have the ability to be able to impact and affect them. And even just with ideas or just this feeling of difference, they walk away from me with a different perspective. And that's what it was all about when it came to my personal brand and how it works now. I mean, I still profess to be the copier warrior, and I haven't sold a copier in 4 years, right? So, but what's funny is to this day, I'd say probably 2 to 3 times a month, I get a call about it. Hey, Reno, still selling copiers on the side? Or can you help me out? Old clients. Hey, Dale, can you come see us? We'd love to see you. We'd love you to look at this new copier proposal we got. Tell us if we should go with it. I mean, I have people that beg me sometimes, like, could you just sell me one, please? and I'm flattered and honored by that. But bro, listen, the other side is that I deserve it because I earned it.
It was hard work.
People have to think like that too. Like it's important for you to understand what you deserve and what you're owed because of what that work ethic and what you've put in, and to cash in on that. And it doesn't have to be monetary. Cashing in can be a better relationship with somebody, can be just the feeling of fulfillment and happiness that you get in those moments, and not feeling like, oh, should I brag about this? It's not bragging. You're just telling the truth. You're telling your tale. So that's the deepest inside look I can give you on the subject.
You mentioned the tale. One of the episodes that I would love you can hear was with John Livesey, who actually wrote the book, The Sales Isn't the Tale. And we spoke a lot about the storytelling, the power of brand, the power of the tale. And that was just exactly what you described with the, copier warrior, right? And, what is interesting is, for me personally, is that, throughout my research and just learning about the, copier selling, like for me, it's a kind of a metaphor for a product or a service that people are annoyed to buy. But if done right, it creates the value for them, right? So it's sort of like the process of selling such product usually is not creative and based on a certain script, on a certain methodology or the process. And I feel that it's very relatable right now, especially in tech, when, you have a lot of sales execs and you have a very redundant, similar process selling tech, selling SaaS. And it's like tech is becoming like a copier selling of this day. So I think like the approach of being that sales and relating to that, I think it's something that people listening to this are like, oh shit, oh that's me, or that's my approach, right? But just going outside that, right, and creating your story and just putting emotion, right, and being personal, I think is the way to go in modern sales, whatever industry you're in, right? It's just across the industry, especially right now with the high churn, high tech funneling type of sales when you just have those contracts, right? And I love like one of your quotes about that, people are not looking for product experts, right? As much as they're looking for someone who is honest, intelligent, empathetic, real, that they can relate to. And I think like, I saw you being real in your approach with the copier selling. I love your ads, by the way. I would probably attach those too. So they're still cool. So I like watched it with like 8 years or 9 years, right? I thought on YouTube, and it's like they're still cool. So like so it's anyhow, I was just kind of stuck on that. And now one of the concepts that you introduced that I kind of didn't see highlighting before that I loved, and I think we need to stop on it for a second because that kind of translates into your approach. What is the living pipeline? Can you talk to me about the living pipeline?
A lot of people that know us deeply understand the concept just based on the words put together, which is that we believe that a pipeline, a funnel, is an old and outdated perspective on building your business and your book of business and closing your book of business as a salesperson. I believe that a funnel or a pipeline is like an old, rusty, leaking concept. And so I look at this identity of a living funnel as like a tree, is the way that we narrate the imagery or the aesthetic of what rebels will see it as. That it's less of this like 90-day thing that compartmentalizes and compacts everybody into this terrain and it shoves them down into it to get a deal. And it's more of this ecosystem of branches blooming and fruit, blossoming, and even flowers or whatever, whatever tickles your fancy. But again, the perspective being, why just because somebody said no in 90 days, why does that mean we can't ever sell them something? Or why are we so focused on the 90-day cycle that we lose the perspective of the long term in the first place? Like, how many times in the sales world, I wish they did stats like this, that a company wins business that's hardline pushing for the transaction and loses the renewal to someone else, right? And it's got to be a huge number, right? And that's probably why people are afraid of it. At the same time, I love competition and a healthy amount of competition. I think it's very important. But I also think about just the ramifications of the way that we treat something like a pipeline. And the problem is that like the ramifications is that we don't build a good reputation. We don't allow other people to truly and ultimately understand who we are and what it is that we're trying to do with them. So we like this. It's the living pipeline is twofold. It's this identity of understanding like how people are, how they act, and not to stereotype them by any means, but what would accommodate communication with them. So I'm a big believer in psychology. My wife's a neuropsychometrist, and was in psychology all the way up through her master's. So I kind of like that was my college. I didn't go to college. I played music in a band from 17 to 22 on Warner Brothers Records, and I started selling copy machines. So my college was like my wife's degrees, and I nerded out on the psychology stuff where it was so fascinating to me. And I love the real rawness of it and how foundational it should be in our lives, yet we don't look at it that way. When people think of psychology, they think, oh, you're depressed, so you need to talk to a psychologist. Like, no, I try to figure my brain out better, or my actions, or the way that the world works, and not like how to justify it, but just understanding, basic methodologies of communication and behavior skills. So when we look at the living pipeline, the first thing that we do is we create personas. And again, we're not putting people in a box, but we're saying like, how do we create accommodating behaviors for these types of people, whether they're short fuses, or they're very introverted, or they're not as talkative, but you can clearly tell they party. Like what kind of person are they, and how can we, again, build something very altruistic with them and fruitful. And then the other side of it is like the time-based concepts. Like we compartmentalize that too much. Like we have this identity even inside of the living pipeline of what we call a granddad. And it's basically a person that has taken a liking to you, but they're very tied into the status quo. They're not just, which is the enemy of sales, by the way. They're not just going to shake up the apple cart because they like you. And instead it's going to take a lot of time if you're willing to put it in, and eventually they'll come to you. That could be 10 years in some industries of what you sell, but it could change your life at the same time too. And in the process of getting to that sale, all the things leading up to it, the way that you push yourself, that you persevere through moments, that you build relationships, that you better understand this other human or humans, it changes who you are. It changes those people as well too, and it creates really good outcomes. Like most of my clients, especially long sales cycle clients, like some of them took up to 6 years. Wow. to work a cycle and to win something. And some of them were definitely a decade, but where I won something, but not to build a relationship, right? But I look back at those relationships and I think I could pick up my phone and call any of them right now. Hey, it's Dale. What's up? It's nice to talk to you. Are you busy? Just want to catch up. And I guarantee you that I would have people in the middle of like a baptism pick their phone up because of how much we mean to each other. And I'd do the same for them if they called me. And so the other side of it is like, what is time? Well, time is the most valuable thing that we can give to one another. So why treat it like a process? Why short term it? Why seek into instant gratification so much? And so the living pipeline is that type of ecosystem. And obviously there's actionable items, there's experiences that you can give people. If I'm going to work a 2-year cycle in a sales inside of a sales process, because that's when the contract ends for what it is I'm selling. For 2 years, I need to be able to earn this person's trust. And so we have an entire playbook that basically goes through, here are some great experiences to give people, how to get closer to them, how to work, deeper on that relationship, and how to make an impact. So that's it in a nutshell.
Can we sit on a few examples of from the playbook of sort of like experiences that you saw, generate the most sort of like relationship or sort of like value out of those outcomes? Can you give a few examples of those that you saw, like, or just from top of your mind, just to kind of give the listeners an example of what do you mean by that?
Yeah, for sure. So let's do this. I had a big aerospace company that I worked for a few years. And one of the first things I did when I knew that I had a solid 18 months that I was going to have to work this account before I would get the sale, what I did is I marked it in the calendar like when we met. And so in Synopsis, since I understood that I was going to hit a year mark, right, I was going to hit this anniversary where we had known them for 12 months. What I did is instinctively I placed a calendar call where I was going to deliver them a cake, and it was like a happy anniversary cake. And that's all it said, is just happy anniversary. And I had a giant QR code right in the middle. And so happy anniversary, giant QR code with a bunch of candles. I left it with the front desk, said, please leave it for these 4 people. If you could put it in the conference room, have them all into it. There was a little note with it as well, too. It was kind of silly, but nothing directed it back toward me. So when I scanned that QR code, which got 447 scans, they had 1,000 employees at this location. And so in my head, I just figure they literally had everybody scan this thing. Or they scanned it so much themselves, showing people, right, that it was stupid. But this was one of the greatest moments of my life where I realized ultimately that thoughtful experiences for people that are curious and drive curiosity are some of the most amazing moments for individuals. So they scanned the QR code. And what I did is funny, is I beat around the bush for the first 15 seconds of the video where they don't see me. They just see stuff and they don't even hear me. And then all of a sudden, like, I emerge from behind a copy machine, and it's like, hey, you didn't think it was me, did you? You were kind of confused, I bet. And hey, I just wanted to wish you guys a happy anniversary. I was like, oh, you don't know what today is? And then there's a cutscene, and I'm sitting with a piece of cake in front of me and a hat on that says happy anniversary. And I said, today, it's been 12 years since the day we met. Come on, guys. Like, am I the only one that cares that much about this? And that's all I kind of just ended the video at that. And little bit of music, a little bit of outro, just a fun experience. And where I thought it was going to take me 18 months to get this deal, additionally, I got the deal a month later. And I wasn't trying to get the deal by sending this cake and this QR code concept, but a month later, they actually said, hey, we're ready to start exploring it now, and we're ready to do it early, and we want to give you the business. So let's tell us everything that you need so we can just hit it in one shot and make this happen. And that was that. So a good perspective of the touch piece is ultimately is things that feel personal, things that are non-traditional, things that are curious by nature, and things that ultimately that drive that experience. It's like the quote you read earlier, which I'm very grateful for all the research you did on me, but the quote of like, people seek experiences. Like that's it's like the number one gift that they give themselves, like jumping out of a plane or climbing the side of a mountain, or just like driving through a really cool spot and seeing the visual or learning the history or hearing the stories. Those types of experiences, people seek them on a daily basis. And if we can give them willingly to people, we're blessing their life.
Now, what was the product or service that you've been selling to this particular client? I just wanted to understand it because, people would say, yes, Dale, well, that in this case, yes, but what if my product is too technical? What if my clients are very technical, busy people, they don't need that personal touch, et cetera, et cetera? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I have a pretty simple answer for that, which is that you're wrong, that people are people, that every single person that you seek to serve goes home and sits at a dinner table. They watch Netflix. They're normal. They poop, right? We have created this persona around somebody in business as if they're untouchable or invincible or, this whole identity. And the way that we box things in is wrong. It's time to rebel. And that's what I would tell people. Stop sitting around making excuses and rebel and give people the type of experiences that they deserve. I don't really care what you think. Because ultimately, that's the kind of thought process and why I'm so hardline about this, that has put us in the place that we are today, which is that when people say things like, it's not personal, it's business. It's it's business, right? It's business. Okay, cool. So you're talking about when you fired that 20-year employee that can't get their pension now, right? Because that's not personal, that's business. Or the sexual harassment charges against these 3 women at your organization, that's business. That's what we're boxing this thing into in the first, here moving forward, instead of understanding that everything is, we use it as a cop-out, this identity of my prospect's too technical, or this is a business environment. It's a cop-out. It's absolute garbage, and I denounce it.
Yeah. Hey, I have another quote, right? I have so many quotes today, and I think that, when the book's going to come out, I think you're going to include all of those, right? Or you can be just having more people quoting. So let me be one of the people that just start quoting you before the book is out, right? And then when the book is out, then more people are going to quote you. So it's going to be obvious, then you're going to have less of those quotes for you, right? So now another quote here is, too many times in sales, we'll rely on surface level interactions in order to compete on activity in our CRM and call it a day. All the while lying to ourselves that we've got the sales in the bag. This is just to support your point, right? So if we are thinking about the transactional sales and just working with the funnel, working with the pipeline, and not putting the persona or personal-ish in that sort of thing, then we always also forecast transactionally, right? And we always look at hey, I have this highly qualified deals that I'm working off, sending check-ins, sending the follow-ups, and at the end, I'm sure that, I've got this deal, I've got the sales, right? But we all know that forecasting doesn't work, right? How many times the team, being head of sales or VP of sales, the team said, hey, I'm bringing on this 3-4, I'm confirming but at the end of the day, it's not going to happening. So this is just kind of to support the point that there is a reason and there is a logic and there is a sort of a fundamental philosophical and psychological truth to what the living pipeline is, what that's sort of putting the personality and what everything we just discussed. If you put that into perspective, I think, and you think that, well, that's the way that things are, right? That's the way that we kind of live. So it's interesting that not many people, especially in sales, especially being in a sort of like technical role or just thinking about this more, technically, they don't put enough thought into an actual, be human being of or actual persona of the things, which I'm sure that the best top salespeople that are having the best longevity, especially in my organizations, they are those people. They always tell the story. They always tell the tale. Any thoughts to add on this?
And I agree wholeheartedly in what you're saying, that ultimately we've created processes that lie to us as salespeople. That's how I see it. They make us feel better. They make the board of directors feel better. And it's controllable as well too, right? It's something that people can put their thumb on and control us over. The same people that can fire you or take your pension away or, like do whatever the heck that they want at any point in time, right? So to me, like it reinforces the earlier point that we were both making in the conversation, and ultimately I'm in full agreement with this idea that we're just super disconnected with the way that we look at sales as a process and in the business world.
So when we talk about the rebellion, it's sort of like the change. Like we wanted to change something, we want to rebel. The things should be different. Now, one of the things that that I'm curious about, that I sort of like stumbled on, was that, you mentioning that there are a lot of strategies or there are a lot of outreach strategies that companies apply and usually hang out on for, right? But instead of using more creative strategies that can actually work, right? So, like just generally for the sales leaders or the leaders here right now, how do I empower creativity? How do I empower and sort of like flourish and like create the culture of creativity in the sales team? Because you're a pretty creative person and your ads are super creative. I couldn't even imagine how fun would that be to kind of produce those, right? And just kind of have the team just on that. And you obviously, the way, the sales rebellion works, just generally, I'm sure that you put a lot of creativity into what you do, and you work with the different sales teams that are more traditional, that are more creative. So how would I nurture that creativity in my team? And then what is that creativity going to look like?
Yeah, so I think if you lack creativity, well, first and foremost, it's why I started this company, and there's amazing organizations out there that can help with the creativity process. And just think about how you were just saying, like, I wonder what it would be like to shoot that commercial with Dale and his team. And you're right. Like whenever we hire media people, it's pretty fun because we show them, the scripts and all the layout of the commercials that we want to do. And they're usually like, for real? Is this for real? And then I love it even more when we just give somebody a topic and say like, make this insane. And this is what we want to convey to people. I love that. I love tapping into that. There's tons of people out there that everyone listening to right now can lean into. It doesn't have to be the rebellion, but for yourself, this is the strategy. The first thing that you want to think about is how to give a physical experience to people. So what can I do that allows somebody to have a tangible item in front of them that ignites the senses, right? There's 5 of them in total. And how is it that we can ultimately tap into 2 or 3 at a time, right? If not all 5. So whether it's smell, whether it's taste, there's a lot, right? But this whole identity of something like a crumpled letter, as an example, is very simple. Some people think like, well, I'm not that creative. Well, in 2009, I started crumbling up pieces of paper, folding them into a red envelope, putting head honcho on it, or head honchette. I did that one too for all the ladies. And I would take that down to one of my prospects and they'd open it up like, what is this? And the first line they would read is, you're probably wondering why this letter is crumpled up. 99% of the sales and marketing you get is trash. And so I did the right thing by pre-crumpling this one for you to throw it away. And it's not a gimmick, because I'm speaking to an actual emotion that someone feels around salespeople, because the fact is that everyone hates salespeople, even salespeople. It's a travesty, right? It's why we have a rebellion. But listen, that's not that creative, in my opinion. That's just like natural human emotion being conveyed. And so look at the stereotypes of your industry. Think about the inside jokes and think about the things that everyone knows about that, like, they can't stand in some cases. and use that in light of introducing yourself to someone for the first time and in a way that is unique and gives a good and fun perspective. Josh Brown likes to talk about my copier brick. And if nobody's heard of Josh Brown, check Josh Brown out. He's an absolutely incredible sales trainer. He likes to talk about this brick that he actually got before I even became the copier warrior or the leader of the sales rebellion. Like still back when I sold copiers, he saw this thing and heard about me through the grapevine kind of thing. And it's good times, right? But I digress. This brick, I used to leave it with the receptionist with a little comic strip and tell them, hey, could you give this to the person in charge of the copy machines? And most of the time they would read it and it could relate to them just as much as it could the person in charge. And it was basically like, hey, your copier sucks and it breaks. And so here I brought you this magic repair brick, and it had instructions on like how to throw it full speed and hit the copier as hard as you could and like release emotional stress and then put the copier back and like, sorry, you're still going to have to call your service department, or you can call me and we'll see what we can do. And again, like the creativity is really just based around like, what do I fix and what are people's problems that they deal with on a daily basis? The more that I can translate that kind of thing, the better. Like we send to sales leaders all the time who ghost us, which I think is hilarious. But we send to sales leaders all the time two different things. One is a joke card about ghosts. It's just a 4x6 and it's got a joke in it and it's really hilarious. And what happens is that the person reading it goes, man, my prospects, they ghost me all the time. And so it's very applicable to them and what they're going through with us, right? And then the second one is it's a missing persons poster. And it's like, last seen on a Zoom at this day and time, and it's got funny descriptions, and it's clearly not a missing persons poster. And we've done it in a very fun and neutral way. So it's not on like a milk carton, which could be offensive to people in some instances, especially if they've suffered through something tragic in their life around someone being missing, right? So we do everything with this identity in mind of how to accommodate the way that we communicate with people. And look, at the same time too, and being creative, sometimes you're going to piss some people off, and that's okay. Because there was a guy one time that I asked him what he thought of this thing I sent him, and he said it's the most unprofessional thing I ever received in my life. My next line to him was like, the slickest Brad Pitt line in the slickest movie he's ever been in. It just rolled right off the tongue too, because it was natural. And I said, yeah, but you remembered who I was, so it seems like it did its job. And he was so quiet for like a solid 8 seconds on the other side of the phone. And then he laughed and said, all right, I'll give you that. And I, 3 years later, sold him $400,000 worth of equipment. Like your best relationships typically start in a negative place, and creative things can be risky and can open that door. And it's okay, right, to have someone respond negatively. We had a client or a rebel who had he's had some of the craziest stories, right? But he had somebody think that, there's like this letter, what's in it? They freaked out for a solid hour, 2 hours. Like, this is weird. We've never gotten anything like this. And when they finally opened it, they were like, wow, we're stupid, which was very humble and hilarious. But they even said that to him. They're like, we were freaking out for no reason. And actually your letter was really funny, and we really appreciated it, and we wanted to set an appointment with you. And then what's even better is he shows up to their office at some point, and people know him. Everybody, not just the decision makers, everyone knows him. So that reputation building perspective as well too, through creativity, is very powerful. So again, if you're trying to get into it, just start with that perspective of what is the emotional context of someone's day to day around what you fix? What are the stereotypes? How can you translate that? How can you just use the generic things like everybody hates salespeople? And that would be the best way to get started.
Now, people listening to this, they think probably well, obviously Dale can be creative. He's running his own company. He's figuring things out. He's creating the product. But what, interesting me the most personally is you've been creative when you were selling copiers, right? When you were a part of the sales team and you were just, being creative, driving that change. So I think that this should be an encouragement for every SDR, every SC that is out there that doesn't drive a change because they think that, well, it's not the way things are, right? Or someone should tell me this. So the question for you is, back then when you were just starting your own creative journey, right? was there a certain like leadership that were just pushing that creativity, or just you had that within you, that creativity part, and you just kind of exploded that within your sales team and just kind of sharing that energy? And just, I'm trying to sort of like show this as an example to kind of to the other people, just an SDRs or salespeople that are out there, that it's possible for you to be that person without actually, being the creator of the product. Because at whatever you are, whenever you are, you can actually create the change and be creative, right? And be rebel.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had a great mentor. I started working with my father, and he didn't tell me to do these things, but he definitely didn't care that I did them. And he thought it was hilarious that I would drop off a sword for a customer to, plow through their copier with, because they suck sometimes. And it got a lot of attention, and my dad appreciated the human side of what I was doing. But I was with him for a few years before he was acquired. And the next company I worked for, I got my hands slapped all the time. Like, hey, you can't send this stuff. You can't drop these things off. And bro, I just ignored them. And I was respectful. But at the end of the day, like, nobody else gets to tell you the quality of your life. Nobody else gets to tell you what it is you're doing is right or wrong. If you're hurting your organization in some capacity or ruining their reputation, that's fine. But the thing is that you're not. Even when somebody gets ticked off about something that you dropped off, like, that person is usually in the wrong in most cases. They're usually somebody doesn't appreciate the human factor in the first place. There's someone that's been brainwashed into this business box, and why would you want to do business with those people anyway? Right? They're the same people that leave 1-star reviews on Yelp because they went to the bathroom at the coffee shop and there was no toilet paper, right? It's like, it's super insensitive people, and ultimately people that think that they are the best and are threatened ultimately by somebody that does something different and thinks outside the box. And that's the reality of it. So if you're an SDR, if you're an AE, if you work for somebody else, like, so did I. And one year I spent like $40,000 on content marketing concepts, like contact marketing concepts like this. But I made over $500,000 that year in commissions, right? Like, on top of my side hustles and on top of my salary. And so it can easily be done, and it can have a massive return for you depending on what it is that you want to do. And look, like, that snowballed into even more money because there was a year that I didn't have to do one cold call because of how many relationships I built and how easy it was for me to network into those groups and to expand my horizons by just having someone else tell somebody else about me, kind of concept. So yeah, in the beginning stages, man, there was a silent mentor, Stu Heineck, How to Get a Meeting with Anybody. It's a great book. There was my best friend and mentor, my father, but it all came directly from, like, me and my heart and my desire to do something different with my sales block. And I'll tell you, the catalyst was this. I was two things. One is I was doing cold calls, and somebody said, oh, it must be copier salesman day. 2 other companies came in right before you. And I said, oh yeah, which one did you like the best? And she goes, you're all the same. That's what she said. And then the second time was at an RFP for a big government entity. And I looked around the room and was like, we are all in a black suit with white shirts and red ties or blue ties. Like, we all had the same clothes on. And I thought, what is happening? Like, this sucks. Yeah. So those were some of the catalysts of, like, just saying, I'm going to be the blue dot in the middle of a bunch of red X's and see if people pay more attention to me from that. And not because I'm starved for it, but because people deserve a better experience, and I'm going to give it to them.
You mentioned your dad, and I've, read a few posts that you posted about your relationship, right? And my next question would be something that I probably could ask, as a broad question when we started this conversation, but I specifically have it to the end just to people to have context of why this question is relevant and important to this particular conversation. So basically, I am a big fan of this podcast, the Diary of the CEO. And I like how Steven, the host, is always asking questions starting off with the mission of the guest, kind of to light out what the subject of the conversation is. And I think that the mission question is very relevant to our conversation as to you, right? As I didn't just saw the mission in exactly words that you wrote, but also I felt it in every piece of content. So, Dale, what is your mission?
My mission is to honor the man that showed me the way. which is my dad, Curtis Dupree. That's my literal mission in life, bro. And it's always been that, but it's definitely evolved over time. Like, I've always wanted to make him proud, but it's gotten, more intense and deeper. I mean, I don't know if people can see this podcast, but like, show me you have a 5-year-old without showing me or telling me you have a 5-year-old, right? Like, family to me is the most important thing. Like, I'm not afraid of it. I'm not ashamed of it. I don't care. Like, my son, if he was here, and he does come to work with me constantly, and he was on this podcast, I could care less. And if people are like, hey, any way you could like turn down your baby crying in the background, I'd be like, no, and get over it.
Do they actually ask this? Do they actually ask?
I've definitely seen it happen to other people, but it's never happened to me, thank God, because it would be that'd be a LinkedIn post like you never saw go viral for sure. But the point is that I want to help people to see ultimately like what is most important. Like, to me, it is like, my father saved my life. He saved me from my depression. He saved me from my attempted suicide. Although like divinity was involved in those things as well too, is my father's prayer and his commitment to me, his commitment to our family, his commitment to servant leadership, to ultimately creating a lifestyle for us that sees past the mediocrity of the world. So when I think of my dad, I think of, just really how blessed I am. 9 of the 10 people in my neighborhood that were my buddies, none of them had a dad. I had a father that was home every night at a certain time to spend time with his kids, and meanwhile, I had friends that never even met their father. I had friends whose dad, picked them up on Saturday. And look, I even hung out with some of those kids' dads, and they were terrible people. And I wasn't just a kid thinking that, like, I'm an adult looking back on that going, man, that was intense. And as much as it sucks, it also like, it got to show me just how good life can be if we make the right choices and we're intentional with what we do. And so that mission, ultimately, this identity of me wanting to honor the shadow that literally, overpowers anything that I will ever do in life. Because like, my actions, my belief system, bro, they all come from my dad and the beacon of light that he was for me in my life. I want people to feel that. People that never got to meet my dad up to 2016 will never know him physically or personally, but I want them all to speak his name through interactions that I've had with them, or stories they've heard about him through me, or experiences that they've witnessed because of my father or myself. And that's the mission, bro. The mission is to change the world one person at a time, to see that there's more to life. And really what it boils down to with this, for people that really want ultimate context, my dad was the best at keeping his business life, his personal life, and his private life the same. That there was transparency, and that ultimately there's trust in that. And there is a humanization in that process, or a humanization portion of that process, causes people to think about themselves differently even, and changes the game. At my father's funeral, I stood up to give the eulogy, and I looked out into a sea of people, bro. It was one of the most impactful moments of my life. I even thought to myself for a moment, these people are at the wrong funeral. I don't recognize half of them. And then afterwards, for literally 6+ hours, people came up and told us stories. People we'd never met before. Some that would say like, yeah, I met you when you were this tall, that kind of thing. And the best stories, the majority of the stories people would tell started with, your dad sold me a copier. That was such a crazy moment, to think that through business and through such a dumb thing, right? Ultimately, like a copying machine, that my dad could change the way that people live their lives. Some of the stories were just absolutely insane, but no matter what, like, they all held the same amount of weight and water, which was that my dad was so purposeful and intentional in his walk, that he had success beyond what any person that I know in my own existence has ever had, in the value and really the worth of his relationships and the community that he built around him through his sacrifices and his mission to really silently change the world, like one person at a time, without going around and screaming about it like everybody likes to do. And so I make it my mission to honor that legacy and to continue it forward with every breath that I take.
now having access to technology, having access to platforms, you can enable more hearts, right? And just kind of drive more change to, to honor the legacy, right? And, doing that at a higher scale. I appreciate you sharing this, Dale. I think one of the last thing just to say here is Dusty Rollins, right? One of your clients, Rebels, he said about you that Dale is going to make you a better being. Then you, sir, are on the right mission. And that this is a great mission. And I, appreciate you for sharing this mission on our podcast. Because this is, I think that this mission would impact a lot of listeners. It impacted me, and I would love to share this mission with you and to also be able to honestly impact lives and make change and create value and create happiness. And again, not the buzzy bullshit happiness word that we hear every day, right? But an actual context of the happiness, right? For everyone around us, right? Hey, before I let you go, is there anything that within the topics that we discussed that we skip through or skim through that you feel like we need to sit down and spend a few minutes that would create value for our listeners?
And I think we covered a lot of ultimately the mission of the rebellion and the way that we seek to serve others and how we seek to change the game as well for others. So I'm grateful for the conversation, for the good topics, for the great talk. And the thing that I would just leave people with ultimately would be, don't be afraid to rebel. When people are saying, hey, go this way or do it like this, but in your heart, you recognize that you've been called for more and that there is a way, another way, the way to do it better, to rebel and to remember that you have an entire community at your back. It's not just you and what that little voice inside is telling you. There's a lot of us. And that's a powerful thing, right? Because look, a spark is something that we typically kind of minimalize, right? A spark, though, can turn into a fire, and that fire can turn into a blaze, and that blaze can burn down the world, and that's what we seek to do. Get rid of the status quo, burn down the mediocrity of the way that it's been done, and build a kingdom of rebels.
Hey, Dale, I appreciate you for who you are, and I appreciate the time, and I also appreciate the conversation we had. Thank you so much.
Cheers, bro. Appreciate you.